Haven't banged a gavel in a while. That felt good. Good evening. I'm John Higdon, Mayor of Matthews. I'd like to welcome everyone to our Board of Commissioner meeting for February 28th, 2022. I'd like to start with some introductions. On my left, your right, we have Assistant Town Manager Becky Hawk, Commissioner Renee Garner, Commissioner Larry Whitley, Mayor Pro Tem Ken McCool, our Town Manager Hazen Blodgett, Town Attorney Charlie Buckley, Commissioner Mark Tofano, Commissioner Gina Hoover, Commissioner John Urban, Town Clerk Lori Canapino, and our Communications Coordinator Maureen Keefe. So we'd like to go ahead and start. We'll move to the next agenda item, the invocation from Mark Tofano. Commissioner Tofano, sir.
For those that wish to, please join me in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we come before you humble and flawed in every way, seeking guidance and wisdom and discernment during our deliberations this evening. As we emerge from the scourge that has covered this world for so long, we ask that you remove the fear that has gripped so many and wrap your loving arms around those who have suffered or lost loved ones. Please give comfort and peace to those in our town who are in need, and give strength and courage to those throughout the world who are experiencing the trauma and the tragedy of war and conflict. We ask for your protection for our men and women in uniform wherever they may be. Please lift up and encourage all those who serve us in our precious town with your mercy and loving kindness. May the words that we speak and the thoughts that we have this evening be acceptable to you, dear Lord. And it is in your glorious and mighty name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner Tofano. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It felt good to do that to a real flag and not a virtual one. So thank you. Move on to an update on COVID-19 from our Fire Chief, Rob Kinnenberg. Rob.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. It's good to see all of you again. This report's going to be a little less formal and a little more reflective than they have been in the past. 2 years ago, I stood up here and for the first time, we started talking about COVID. So it's been a long road. The next formal report from the EOC and the Public Health Department comes out next week. So we've cobbled together some, what I hope are some final points about COVID. As of today, the 7-day positive test average is 6.8, based on an average of 13,500 daily tests. The 7-day average positivity rate has declined steadily since its high on January 24th. Hospitalizations have also dropped significantly. As of February 26th, Mecklenburg County has experienced 271,580 cases. We've experienced 1,520 deaths, and currently 72 facilities are still in outbreak status. We're considered to be in moderate community spread based on a 7-day average of 6.8%, but we hope to reach the gold mark of 5% soon. Back at the beginning of February, Atrium reported a sharp decline in the number of patients on life support. That we don't have an updated number. As of February 3rd, 66% of Mecklenburg County had been vaccinated fully, and about 30% had received boosters. That number's going up, but the number of people entering vaccination has plateaued. Mecklenburg County ended the mask mandate on February 26th, and CMS ends on March 7th. mass transit, healthcare, and other sectors continue to require masks to acquire services. Matthews followed the county's mask mandate policy, but we too ceased to require masks in town facilities. Employees are encouraged to wear masks when they or family members have respiratory issues as a matter of general precaution. Mask wearing by first responders during patient encounters should be a standard part of PPE. And demand for testing has declined sharply since most households received 2 free test kits. Hopefully, this is the last regular status report on COVID-19. 2 years ago, on January 9th, 2020, the World Health Organization reported a mysterious coronavirus-related pneumonia in China. By January 21st, it had arrived in the United States. By February 25th, the World Health Organization announced that COVID had achieved 2 of the 3 requirements to be classified as a pandemic, illness that resulted in death and sustained person-to-person spread. By March 9th, Charlotte-Mecklenburg EOC was ramping up unified efforts to coordinate the response to an unfolding public health emergency. On March 11th, the World Health Organization formally recognized COVID as a global pandemic. Since March, Matthews has been an integral partner in the emergency management effort to contain COVID. We have provided leadership, partnership, and horsepower wherever it was needed. We have vaccinated hundreds of Matthews and Mecklenburg County residents. We have distributed thousands of masks, and we have participated in an uncounted number of meetings. We know how to Zoom better than anybody. While we wish we never had, as a community, experienced COVID, as a community, we are better organized, better connected, and better prepared to respond to the next major crisis that this community faces. That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Chief Kinnenberg, and I do think you deserve a
Clap
round of
for me.
applause for your outstanding leadership during the last 2 years during this unfortunate pandemic. Are there any questions for Chief Kinnenberg? Seeing none, thank you, sir. And I'd
Thank you all for your support. Appreciate it.
like to ask the town manager if there are any items to be added to the agenda.
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Move on to public comment. So I understand, Lori, we do have one person pre-registered to speak. Okay, speak
That's
via
correct.
Zoom.
Name is George Young, 407 Vinecrest Drive, Matthews, North Carolina. Most of the time, the town of Matthews deals with zonings. They deal with budget. Those are probably 98% of what you do. But this is an experiment of democracy that has gone on for hundreds of years in the United States. Currently in the news, we have a country called Ukraine, who has apparently been invaded. This is a part of the world that if you were to speak your mind, which is happening in places like St. Petersburg, you are getting arrested. We have freedoms that exist in this country that most of the world don't have all the time. We had an election 2 years ago, and there'll be another election and another election. Some of you will be here, some of you won't, because we have what's called a peaceful transfer of power. Matthews is not immune from problems. The community center, which used to be a school, if you look at the pictures, they're all white. We had a lot of racism in here. It was in the South for a very long time. There's a lot of issues that you deal with that are very routine. But once in a while, this board may have something of real serious issue to look at. You all made an oath when you got elected to sit in those chairs. I've been in 28 foreign countries in my life. I was stationed in Germany in the military. When I was there, it was East Germany and West Germany. I remember going through checkpoints to get into East Germany, Checkpoint Charlie. It's apparently in a museum now. There's little flags or wreaths that they put where people had been shot trying to cross from East Germany into West Germany. And here we are, decades later, was essentially going in that direction again. So I wanted to bring this up to the board that there's a lot of weight on your shoulders. That's not just a zoning issue. It's not just a budget issue. It's a beautiful country. I've been in countries in which I was followed. Phones were tapped. If anyone went out on the street and said something, you would be found arrested. I was in countries with a civil war was going on. My dad lived there. So I come here, and on a light side, people here actually stop at red lights. It's a little different in some of these places, I'm so grateful to be an American. I am so grateful to be here. I'm very glad to see, by the way, that the memorial downtown for veterans who gave their lives for the type of freedom that we have, the fact that I can stand up here and talk my mind. When I ran for office, I stood on the side of the road with a sign. I went around and handed out pamphlets. There's many places in the world I would be detained for doing that. And in some places I would disappear. In 1956, there was an uprising in Hungary. When Russia took it over, the big guy that was in charge, they killed him. He was shot. So I'm so grateful to be here. And I just thought I'd say this today. It just felt something important. And I apologize, I'm in a little bit of a disarray as far as my clothing. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Is there anybody else in the room that would like to speak tonight? We have a just massive crowd here tonight. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else. We do have somebody that pre-registered, Jelani Johnson, that wishes to participate via Zoom.
Yep, Jelani, if you want to go ahead and unmute and turn your camera on, you can begin when you're ready.
Hi, hello all. I'm Jelani Johnson, and I am so thankful for the privilege to be able to speak with you tonight. I'm here to speak tonight on a matter of public safety. On February 19th, a resident in my subdivision had their car broken into when 4 young males entered our subdivision and went from home to home checking vehicles. After reviewing the footage from the event, I was directed to the Neighbors app by ring.com, and a quick search of the Matthews area revealed that the men dressed in what appears to be the same outfits, or coats rather, have been burglarizing these vehicles since about 2/6/2022. That was around the first post that I found. On one video posted 2/20/22, one of the men was armed as he was checking vehicles. According to the footage, these acts have been taking place between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., weeknights and weekends. Seeing this footage has been extremely unsettling, and I'm hoping that my comment here tonight will accomplish the following: increase police patrol of the residential subdivisions, increase awareness to the citizens of Matthews about these burglaries, and the apprehension of the 4 suspects before these crimes are escalated and someone is harmed. I thank you for your time in this forum, and I wish all a great night.
Thank you. I think you have someone else that's very important there next to you. So, yeah, so I was going to ask, Ms. Johnson, could you tell us which subdivision you live in or this occurred in?
Yes, this occurred in the Creek Bend subdivision on Idlewild. Get out of here. It's right off Idlewild Road.
Thank you very much. Chief Bennington is in the room, so I'm sure he's taking notes. So thank you for your comment.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Let me remind, if there's anyone else in the Zoom audience, they can use the Zoom's raise hand feature. If you're on a desktop or mobile device, you can click raise hand in the webinar controls and you'll be recognized by the name listed in your Zoom window. If you've joined by telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand and you'll be recognized by your telephone number Lori, has anybody else indicated they'd like to speak? Yes. Okay. Great.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Danny Burnham, 312 Demery Lane, Matthews, North Carolina. Just very quickly, I want to say that I don't think Matthews is a racist town. I've raised my kids here. I love the people here. Of course, we have work to do, but this is a beautiful, diverse community, and I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud of all of you. And I also wanted to point out, and I hope I am not wrong in this, but I believe that the Matthews town, I believe that our crime rate has gone down over the past year, when in almost every major city, community across this country, crime rates are skyrocketing. I'm so proud of Chief Pennington. I'm so proud of our police department, and I just want to shout out to them and shout out to my commissioners. Thank you so much for everything you do, and I appreciate getting to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Burnham. Maureen, do we have anybody else? All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 7, our consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve items 7A through 7J. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Whitley, a second by Commissioner Tofano. Is there any discussion? All approved, say aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Move on to unfinished business. Consider deer control options. Mr. Blodgett.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I get started, I do want to thank Lori Canapino for pulling this together, and it's very well done. So at the last meeting, the board directed staff to kind of look into options about our deer population. You know, this has been a theme that has come up in the past with our town. You know, obviously we've heard the stories about deer eating landscaping plants like hosta. Apparently they love hosta. Also accidents and near misses on the roads. On the other hand, we have heard from people that love their deer and really treat them in many ways like pets, or they bring them great joy. We do not, as a town, regulate hunting. The town does not do that. We want to clarify that. We always do, right, Charlie? But we at one time we did allow for the discharge of firearms in the case of bow. You could get a bow permit. It was very restrictive. The hunters had to go through a lot of hoops, a lot of whatever protocols from the department, and then in the not too distant past, we banned that. Obviously, rifles have not been allowed to be just discharged anywhere in town except for in shooting galleries. You know, this is a common problem across the country. It does look like, I guess the classic look is you look at the deer population and you look at the health of the deer, and if the deer are sickly, that's a good indication there are too many deer. I will say I haven't seen too many sickly deer. I don't know if probably everybody in the room's had kind of put their eye on deer. The deer look pretty healthy in our community. According to the police records, the traffic accidents have stayed steady, maybe a drop in 2020. Of course, that could be as a result of less people traveling. You know, in the past, this has been really, to tell you the truth, one of the most controversial issues, the most sensitive issues that I can remember the board dealing with. I remember it occurred when Lee Myers was the mayor. Both sides of the community came out. What Lori put together was I hope y'all looked at the density. Well, we can go down to it. There's a density map. And it is, I will say, I used to live in Eastern North Carolina. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around. There's less deer per mile in Eastern North Carolina than there is in the Piedmont. And then you see in the mountains, and of course, maybe there's just less vegetation in the mountains, whatever, but what it does show around us that the densities in the red at 50 or above per square mile. And the gray area, and you see that throughout the state, the gray area, but that closely is associated with urban areas. And so I'm not really sure why. Maybe they've just avoided doing these deer density studies in urban areas, but so there is the logical assumption you would think is we're surrounded by red and orange. We're probably red or orange in our community. But that's not based on fact. We do have some options. It is very interesting to kind of go through these options. One of them is a specialized hunt where you do bring in experts, and they can shoot with bow and arrow or guns. Communities have done that. The other one is contraceptives for female deer, very expensive. Bald Head Island is the only community that's done that, and that's an island, right? It's controlled, very controlled. One idea is you ship them out. That's called translocation. Very, as you'd expect, very expensive, right? So so kind of the last option, I guess, is we could do a deer count. I do know the biologist, Rupert Medford, his opinion was we're very high in town. Lori, you talked to him. I think he's very busy. He couldn't tell us when he could get around to the count. As I understand, last time we talked to him.
And that's correct. He did say that the number was high enough that you didn't really need an official count, but that if we needed one, he wouldn't be able to do it for us. And I'm waiting to hear back when exactly they might have the capacity to do it from within their office.
Okay. So I think those are the issues before the board. We're happy. Lori and I are happy to answer any questions or what's the will of the board.
So I do have a little bit of insight into this because while I'm not a wildlife biologist, I know one. My daughter has a master's degree in wildlife biology, and she specifically studied deer for a time, and she agrees with the basic tenets of this letter that really the only way to efficiently cull the population and do it in a financially sound way is to actually have hunters come in and cull the herd. Things that I'm interested in, sitting in my Zoom office for the last 2 years overlooking 4 Mile Creek and the Greenway, I see deer pass through my yard every day about the same time. And I think I've gotten to know them. I recognize the deer by different traits that they have and the way they look, different markings, et cetera. So I think I'm seeing the same 8 to 10 to 12 deer every day. As I discussed with town staff, I would be really reticent. I'm not saying the right word. What word am I looking for? Reticent. There you go. Not resident. That's somebody who lives here. Resident to start culling the herd without additional information. I would like to know. I don't want to assume that we have 41 to 50 deer per square mile. I would like to know that more completely. They are very destructive. I put an 8-foot tall fence around my backyard garden because deer were eating it down to the ground, literally every plant every year. And I got kind of tired of it, and they cannot clear the 8-foot fence. But the other concern I have, when we did allow bow discharge here, we only permitted 5 or 6 per year. So clearly we're not doing anything to cull the population when we're taking 5 or 6 deer. And it always made me really nervous. Our town is very dense, and I was always concerned about anything being discharged that had that much power that could conceivably hurt somebody that's not a deer. So that's kind of where I stand. I would like to see some additional studies. The other thing I want to remind our citizens, as much as many of you like to, it's a really bad idea to feed wildlife. And I know that many people put out corn, which my daughter tells me is an absolutely horrendous diet for deer. It mostly passes right through them without a lot of nutritional value. But I hear anecdotally a lot of our citizens are feeding deer, and that's part of the problem. So we really should let them fend for themselves and not feed them. I also know that in approaching the deer in my own yard, they're almost tame. I mean, I can walk, I walked within 5 feet of a deer. I could almost pet it. It's clear that it has no, was not concerned about humans being nearby. And amazingly, some of the deer don't even run away from my dog, who apparently is not too ferocious, but they'll let my dog walk right up to them. So it's kind of crazy. So anyway, to summarize, in my opinion, before we did anything, I would want us to hire somebody to tell us how many deer we have here in a more formalized way by doing camera counts, or I just don't want to assume that we have X number. And I know it's a very controversial topic, and just for my own interactions with people in my neighborhood and people in town and people at Renfro's, it appears that about half the town love deer and half of them hate them. So that's where we stand. Commissioner Garner.
Mayor, I generally agree that we should have a count before we make any informed decisions on whether we want to offer specialized hunts or bow hunts or nothing at all. I'd also like to make a suggestion that we have a coyote count at the same time, so that we know. We're all hearing a lot of discussion about coyotes. A friend of mine played the sounds from her back deck one evening, and it was an entire symphony of coyotes. So if that would be possible to add to the study, it would be interesting to see, and we could learn what the impact of coyotes have on young deer, and what sort of impact the deer population is from the predator prey standpoint.
That's a very good point. A female coyote obviously gave birth to pups underneath my neighbor's back deck a couple of years ago. So they're around, and they are predators of deer. They kill the baby deer. Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
My first question is what's the cost for a deer count? What's that look like?
So since the biologist wasn't able to give me any information on that, I don't have that for you yet, but I will get that the next time we talk about this.
Well, either way, my assumption is it's not going to be cheap. And my question to the board is, what's the means to the end? Because from what I've heard is a lot of people don't want us killing deer. I'm not so sure. I'll have a fiance to go home to if we allow deer to get killed in this town. And quite frankly, I'm not sure getting a deer count is the best use of money. Now, if it's fairly affordable, but I'm just going off of what my thought is, and I assume it'll be costly, and I don't want to waste taxpayer dollars in that way.
Mayor Pro Tem, respectfully let you know that one of your neighbors famously sent a photograph of her backyard and had something like 28 deer in her backyard at one time in one photograph. So I understand why some people are concerned. Was that an anomaly, or do we have that many deer? I would like to know. Of course, we need to get a cost. I would certainly not want to spend tens of thousands of dollars, but if it could be done relatively inexpensively, I think it would be good to know how many deer we have here. Commissioner Urban.
Yeah, I think I would agree with the mayor. The deer count stands if the cost is $100,000. I get that. But the bottom line is we need to have all our facts in order to put a program together so people both pro and con on deer understand the ramifications. What I would suggest is I'd like to piggyback on all this. Clark Bennington is famous for his educational programs. I suggest we do an educational program on deer hunting, not deer hunting, deer population, and get something out to the general public about the pros and cons of obviously feeding the deer and obviously catering to them. I can't imagine what the costs to damage your property is, et cetera, et cetera. But I think if an argument was placed out there, hey, look, we have a population problem. If you continue to feed them, it exacerbates the problem. The foregone conclusion might be a hunt. So maybe if everybody just sort of respected the deer in their own environment, left them alone, and we dealt with that, it might work out. But I don't know if we've effectively done an absolute decent education to the general public that they are inciting more damage and more disruption in the community from that standpoint. And I don't know if we have the data. I don't know if the chief has data on accidents caused by deer. He's nodding his head, yes. Maybe some people would take affront to that, but I think it would be a wise idea that we let the 30,000 citizens, and educate them on what the issues are, and from there. So that's my point.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoover?
Yes, I agree with Commissioner Gardner. She hit upon what I want to discuss. I think we need to also check out the coyotes because I actually walked out to my backyard, dog barking, and there was a coyote. So it's no fun to walk out to. So something we need to also check into.
I was a little doubtful that we had coyotes here until people started sending me all the
No,
videos. And they're definitely coyotes. And then when I saw one give birth at my neighbor's
it's
house,
really being discussed on next door.
yeah,
And you're hearing a
they're
lot of
here.
it on
They're
next
definitely
door.
here. And you know, to add on to that, I guess folks need to keep their house pets very nearby late at night and early in the morning, because that's when the coyotes like to hunt. We've had a few dogs and cats disappear, probably due to coyotes. Commissioner Garner?
And if it eases minds, I think this, a population count is really based on putting up trail cams in strategic locations for a certain period of time, possibly moving them and then going back and looking at those videos. So that paints a fuller picture of what to expect rather than bringing out a team of people who are, you know, walking around town looking for populations of deer.
Agree. And, you know, it is in a natural setting, as Hazen mentioned, you typically look for deer that are starving. That's indicative that there's not enough food for the number of deer that are there. But our deer may be fat and healthy because so many people are feeding them. So we may be getting an artificial look at the population based on how heavy they look, based on just because so many folks are feeding them. So I think I'm hearing the will of the board is to continue to look for what a count would cost and bring it back to the board. I don't think this is anything that's super urgent. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of comment from the public because people are very passionate on both sides of this issue. But I will say the deer can be very destructive, so we want to keep an eye on it if we have too many. All right. Is there any other discussion on this item? Mayor Pro Tem McCool?
What do you mean by destructive? What are you referencing there? People's gardens or to property and life? Because I think we're talking about, when you say destructive, I think that gives a false sense of what's happening.
Well, when they eat every single plant in someone's yard, that's destructive to me. I mean, landscaping plants, and I mean, I haven't decided if I'm for or against culling the herd, but I can tell you I'm a very avid gardener, and I installed raised beds in my backyard, and the deer ate every single plant that I planted down to the ground, killed my entire garden over the course of about 2 nights. And a lot of people plant flower, tulip bulbs. Mr. Tefano, you and I were discussing in your yard. I don't know, you might want to chime in on that and some of the damage you've seen at your.
Well, I cannot grow anything but grass. I mean, it's totally bare down to the ground. And I was hoping that we could get an education program for the deer and actually teach them what to eat and what not to eat. Yes, deer language. But I agree. I cannot grow a thing in my yard. And I'm not good at growing anyway. So when I get this little tiny tomato and it's gone the next morning, it just kills me.
Yeah, I put up an 8-foot tall fence around my garden, and so now the rabbits and squirrels eat very well because the deer can't get to it. So, yeah, I think when we use the word destructive, they're not ripping up houses or anything like that, but they are eating landscape plants to an excessive extent. I think many of us are willing to give half of our plants to the wildlife, but when they eat everything and you can't grow anything around your house, it kind of affects your quality of life a little bit. All right, let's move on to the next item. Reaffirm commitment to EB 5969 North Carolina 51 side path project and approve accelerated project schedule.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you. It's great to see everyone in person tonight. I haven't been here since, well, I guess we all haven't been here for a while. So could you scroll down to the map? I wanted to start with the location. Okay, so here tonight, I want to discuss a project. I'm excited about this project. We've talked about this project before. It's been a while. It is a multi-use path on NC 51, and it is between North Trade Street and Independence Point Parkway. And you can see on the south side of it, that large building is Novant. So that's the hospital. So that helps orient you. On the north side is Pace Avenue and Pace Apartments. And, this project scored really well. It scored well enough that it was not funded through the normal CRTPO, which is the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization process. It actually scored well in the statewide fund. So it has a lot of traffic on this road. You've got a lot of fast moving vehicles. There is currently 0 sidewalks on this side of the street, as well as pedestrians. We know they're out there because you can see the worn path in front of the hospital. There's also 2 bus stops out there, and there's no sidewalk out there. So we were delighted when we got this project, and we are very excited, hopefully, to move forward with the project. Because this was funded statewide, NCDOT, we typically see them lead the charge on these type of projects. However, in this particular case, because it is they consider it a sidewalk project, it's locally administered. So that was something, when we realized that recently, we wanted to jump on this. We wanted to make sure that we were spending these dollars down. So what we did was, well, in the past couple of years, we have been watching the CIP, and we've been increasing the cost of the project. So initially, when in 2017, this project came in at about $1 million. So move forward, 2022, and that $1 million is now 3.5 million. Okay, number one, the cost estimation tool that NCDOT provided us in 2017, because we used their formula, we used the methodology that they gave us, they know was not good at projecting the future costs, because they have since tweaked it, and they've had to increase funds for other projects. And we all know how pricey and how expensive construction has gotten over the few years. So we are coming back to you tonight with this updated cost. If you want to scroll up to the memo, that would be great. So, okay, so let's talk numbers, because I feel confident that this is a really important project for our town. This is a gap, sidewalk gap. We talk about sidewalk gaps all the time. This is a huge gap in our community, and we hopefully can get this funded. This is an 80-20 match. So this is NCDOT provides 80% of the funding. We pay 20% of the funding. In the CIP that you all looked at over the weekend and each year, we have been increasing that cost. So while the $1 million is what we said in 2017, every year, Susan and CJ in the Public Works Department have been increasing the cost. So you've seen over the weekend, when you're looking at the CIP documentation, that we put in $700,000 as match. So we've been escalating the costs for you all over the past couple of years. However, we have not gone to you all officially and asked for more dollars. So tonight, what we're looking to do is, not only do we have to ask you all for more dollars, but we have to go back to NCDOT and ask for more dollars from them as well. So again, it's not the official CRTP process that we're used to. We actually have to discuss this with division staff. Division 10 and the state are the folks that give us more dollars, give us additional dollars for this type of project. So with that said, in order to stay on schedule, so construction right now in the statewide transportation improvement program is in 25, we need to start design. The initial ask for that design would be about $500,000. But again, it's that reimbursable program where as invoices come in, we then submit them to finance, they submit them to the state. And so really it's about $100,000 for that fiscal year 2023. And we did provide you with a chart of like how it would break down each year. So that, and because we know that this is more than we anticipated or that you've heard, in the past. So basically it's going to cost us more money. It's a very important project and we need to start somewhere. So we wanted to start with trying to create this project in its full version and see what, what everyone's, see what you all think of it. So I guess I'm open to questions.
Dana, I've got a question. Does the total amount consider that Novant may give some of the land to us and we don't have to pay to?
That is a
acquire it?
great question, and I didn't mention that. So yes, Novant, we have not incorporated that cost savings in this. So the way we do cost estimation is very conservative. So we would, whatever, if Novant chooses to donate property, then that would come out of the total right-of-way costs.
And I certainly hope they would do that, because this is a huge benefit to our community, but definitely a huge benefit to their employees and visitors to their campus. So would like to see that.
And that's half of the project. Half of the project is in Novant's, on Novant's campus.
Okay, Commissioner Tefano?
Yes, I don't know who to direct this question to, Hazen or Dana. What is the current annual budget item for sidewalk?
Maintenance
Both for
and repair.
repair and for installation?
So we don't have, so in CJ's budget, last I saw it was $50,000. So it's really not a needle mover, for lack of a better word. Really, it's like, oh, this is broken, this little section, this neighborhood or whatever, it's cracked, and we'll go out and fix them, trip hazards and things like that. So the CIP, I don't know if there's anything in this year's CIP, but Dana did mention, but just so everybody knows, the CIP, the only year that y'all commit, like the CIP is a 5-year plan and you only commit 1 year at a time. So just because it's $700,000 in 25, the board is not on the hook until 25, and y'all say, yes, we approve this budget. So there's no money, in essence, there's no capital project money budgeted in 22.
And if I'm understanding this memo correctly, we have to complete the PE by 2023. How long does it take to begin in 2023? I'm sorry. How long would that PE take?
Typically 18 months or so for design, 2 years. It just depends.
Okay. All right. And I'm assuming that is it the entire 500K needed at the beginning of the PE, or is it phased?
As we invoice, then we pay. So it's not like we have an upfront cost. It's as we go.
Do you have any estimate of what those tranches would be?
It depends on the month and the workload that the company does.
So maybe I hope this answers your question. So what happens is the board, if let's say y'all vote to say, yeah, this is a good idea. So the board will do a budget amendment at some point in time for $500,000. So y'all appropriate $500,000. We spend that down as we design the project, and then DOT reimburses us 80% of that. But y'all front the money, and then DOT reimburses us basically every quarter. So it's not like at the end of the project.
Yeah, that was my next question. What is the reimbursement schedule?
It's typically 1 quarter. Well, is it better than that?
We can do it monthly. If we wanted to, we could do it monthly. We would like to, finance asks us to do things quarterly just because of their workload. So we typically invoice quarterly.
Since I got the floor, I'll say one other thing. What's interesting about this dynamic, and this is why I think when we go through like the audit, because in theory, the cutoff date is June 30th, right? And the town could have appropriated the funds and waiting on reimbursement from the state. So I think when we see these fund balances, we all have to say, okay, what have we already spent, or what are we going to get reimbursed? And I think like in next year, that's what my recommendation would be, is we make sure the board understands, here's what we've committed, because it's a moment in time for June 30th, 2022. And you look at it 5 months later and things may have changed. You may have less or more fund balance in your coffers.
Yeah, so if I'm looking at a fund balance chart, we'd see this drop as we spend, and then it would go back up as we're reimbursed, and it would just kind of go down like this. And the overall expenditure to us was, and let me make sure I understand this, would be 20% of 500K?
For design, yes, for the
Okay.
design.
All right, so $100,000 over a period of a year and a half.
Basically.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can we go back to the sketch of the actual project? I think it's the last slide in the. I think this is exceptionally important to the town. And I am aware that a couple years ago, there was a fatality right here at this intersection from someone trying to get across really quickly. I don't know if the person that was unfortunate victim maybe perhaps was walking over here to access to a sidewalk and there wasn't one here. But it's really needed. It's a highly populous area and I'm fully in support of this. Plus, anytime that someone's willing to pay for 80% of a project for the town, it's a great deal for us. So are there any other comments? Commissioner Urban?
Yes, you're absolutely correct, Mr. Mayor. We have traditionally, with the 80-20 splits, taking that as a good return on our investment. My question, Dana, it says 1,600 linear foot of wall. Are we talking about retaining wall?
Mhm.
So we're ending up paying for retaining wall, but the grade is such that at Novant, it's over your head. And as you get down to the oncology building, it's below back a curb. So in some cases, retaining wall is holding back earth and then holding up sidewalk. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, and I will say that Susan is on the line if you want detailed engineering questions answered. This obviously is a sketch. We have not engineered this project. And so
Once they get into detailing, maybe such they can grade back in a little bit further and alleviate that, because 1,600 linear foot of retaining wall is probably is 2/3 the cost of the project. I mean, it's
and
incredible.
We realize that out there, there's a lot of tree canopy,
Mhm.
and we are trying to, we want to make sure we build in enough cushion that we can do our best to save tree canopy. So that is, I think, one. And again, Susan is on there. She is. I see her on the screen, so she may want to speak to this.
Well, I don't need to get into those details tonight, but I'd like to sort of know what that balance is, because to be honest with you, you could grade in, you could take trees down, grade into it, fix it, and then come back with a very nice alley of trees, street trees, and sort of beautify that stretch as well too. So I'd like to make sure of that, but retaining walls are extremely expensive. I saw that and I figured that's where the cost was going. Thank you.
Susan, would you care to comment?
I don't know. I think Commissioner Urban summed that up just perfectly. And that's definitely something we take a critical eye to when we get into design.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Commissioner Garner? I'm sorry. Are there any other motions?
I would make a motion to approve the initial study. I don't know exactly how to word it.
It's
at this
on that.
point in time. Okay. Yeah, of the page right above it.
One more.
One more below the.
Scroll down.
Up. Okay.
It's right
Excuse me.
there.
There it is. It's on the screen.
Okay, got it. Hold on a second. Okay, so this is the recommended action. Is this what it is? Okay.
Sir.
I move to approve the increased amount of the 20% match for the Matthews Township Parkway Multi-Use Path, EB 5969, and appropriate the amount to advance engineering of the project not to exceed $500,000 from the general fund for fiscal year 2023.
Second.
A motion from Commissioner Tufano, a second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. We'll not take a roll call vote. We'll take a vote. It's been saying that for 2 years. I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. You probably have to slap me a few times. Sorry. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Commissioner Hoover stands in opposition, so that passes 6-1.
So point of clarification, we don't have this grant yet, right? We think it scores very well,
Yeah.
but we have to go back to the state. They've seen whether we're in good faith. We got to get commitment from them.
But we have $1 million of the 3.6 million. So we have to go and get our division engineer, Brett Knight, to agree to give us more funding. So like I said, they funded other projects in the same scenario where the estimation tool didn't appropriate appropriately. So we will keep you guys posted. How's that? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to new business. Item 9A, consider community center window repairs. Corey King.
Where's Corey? I didn't see him. I sent him a text. I didn't see a couple minutes ago. I was worried, Corey. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, Mayor, Town Board. There are a number of windows in the Matthews Community Center in need of repair. For a majority of the windows, reglazing, priming, and painting will do the job, but for other windows, there is a lot of rotten wood. Actually, I'm going to scroll all the way down. Like I said, a lot of rotting wood. The original plan, so the original plan was to ask or request dollars for this job in the FY23 budget. But as we got into fall of 21, staff really started to see an increasing amount of this type of rotting wood and really thought action was needed sooner than later. So we did reach out to Stuart Gray with Mecklenburg County Landmarks Commission because replacement of the windows was an option we wanted to look at. And so we worked with them to make sure we preserve the historic integrity of the building. But as we got into it and really started to talk to Stuart about it, we did think that repairing these windows would be our best option. So he did recommend 3 vendors that he's worked with on past projects where they restored windows in historic buildings. We worked with one of the vendors and used his conversations with him along with a quote to build a budget for this project. So tonight we are asking for funding to move forward with this window repair project here in FY22 for the windows in the Matthews Community Center. I'll share with you, there are 103 windows in the Matthews Community Center. Not all of them are the same, I'll say. So again, that's another reason why just repair the existing windows. And actually the method that staff thinks is most effective is to repair in place, meaning they will take them out one by one, repair the windows on the site of the community center, and then reinstall them, there. And that certainly helps us with our programming, and we won't have to shut the building down for any significant amount of time. So again, we are requesting funding from the tourism fund balance to then be appropriated into the operation budget of the park.
Corey, do we believe these are the original windows?
No. Well, some of them could be, as Stuart and I began, Stuart even looked, and you can tell where over time, some windows have been replaced. For example, in one room, one window has 8 panes. The one directly beside it only has 6. So you can tell where things have sort of happened over time.
Yeah, I guess what I was getting at is if we had a lot of windows that were like 20 years old, we seem to be going to great lengths to preserve 20-year-old windows. But if they're older, that would be more understandable. Commissioner Stefano?
Yeah, Corey, the repair, does that include energy efficient windows, double pane, vacuum sealed? No.
These will be I guess some of the glass may be replaced, but mostly just reglazing and just reinstalling the current windows.
Commissioner Urban?
Yeah, since this is a historically designated structure, we have to work with the Landmarks Commission. And having done the same thing with the Massey Clark House, we had to go back in kind. So you can't, unless you want to do something inside of the structure, but I think that's probably designated as well. But my question is, they're just reglazing. So it's the putty process of going around the window. They're not removing the window in its entirety. They're just resecuring the glazing. Is that correct?
Yes. Now for the windows where wood needs to be replaced.
That's my question, because if you weren't doing that, I would have recommended you removing one window to look at the potential of destruction beyond that point. So my bottom line is keep an eye out, because you can do all this work and then next thing you know, you find out the window just falls out completely because everything else is rotting. So I don't know if we should be inspecting while we're going along or that was already done. The other thing is in the future, Stuart will allow, Mr. Gray will allow this, is you can actually have a window fabricated to replicate. And then that discussion about energy efficient window may be coming into play, but we had Halsey at the lumber yard recreate. And so somewhere down the road, you might be able to start doing that, because at some point you will not be able to keep reglazing those windows.
Yeah, we do feel confident in the vendor. Again, Stuart has worked with this group a number of times.
I know those folks. Yeah.
Projects. So And yeah, that cost, what he gave us did have the little quotation or notation that this includes what he's already seen. So once we get into the repair,
Okay.
there could be some things that
That's
we
perfect.
brought back up.
Commissioner Whitley.
Thank you. So Corey, what I'm hearing is, just so that I'm clear, they're just going to take one window out. How about the casing and all? Are they going to repair that if needed?
Yes, any wood that's rotten.
Is that extra from the window?
Well, the seal and the casing is all part of this project.
Okay, so, 103 windows, and I'm for replacing the windows, but I've seen advertising on new windows with double panes for installation. Also, if you buy one, you get one free. Now, 103 windows is good, but if we're gonna invest money in making sure, we need to be energy efficient and make sure that what we put back in there has the whole window seal, because I repaired what Commissioner Urban said. We prepared the window, but not the casing, and the hard wind came and blew the thing out. I had two of them. I had to go back and rebolt it into it. So I would be in favor of replacing and making sure that a brand new one with double panes and make sure that it's insulated as we go back in this building. And also somewhere, if we get one, that you get another free. I mean, I know we want to go with this vendor, but if we're gonna spend that much money on 103 windows, I'd like to get the bang for our bucks and save us the money. I don't know. I just try to do a little math on how much it's gonna cost per window. And if the building's old wood, I saw there, it looks like you need a whole case and all repaired there.
And I'll share the,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Corey. You can respond to that.
the window sizes are not traditional. We could not just go out and find, it will have to be a custom made window to be reinstalled in the building.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking, because I had to do custom windows here at Glass Windows right up the street from where we are right now, right on the street here. But they will give you a good price for custom, especially this amount of numbers that we're spending. I'll be interested to see what kind of discount we will have with these many windows. That's a lot of windows, and certainly we want the bang for the buck and want the best window that's going to last us for a while.
Commissioner Garner.
Do we have a picture that just Maureen or Lori, could you pull up a picture of the community center to show the size and the scale of those windows so that we can get a better idea of what they look like and what we're talking about? And if that's possible, while they do that, I think Corey is being very calm in his plea for these dollars. But I think it was last week that I had sent a text to Hazen showing him a picture of one of the windows, and they are literally falling out of the building. This is something that needs to happen sooner rather than later. And not only because you don't want glass all over the ground, but it's a poor reflection of our town to have a building, these windows look like this. They're large. And I think it was, one of those windows on the left, there was a pane just hanging there. So,
And we have fixed that, by the way.
yeah, I saw that it was fixed. And I was worried that it was going to get cold and you guys were going to get some nice drafts in there.
And I have been in that building when they're having gymnastics or dance or whatever upstairs, and there's a lot of vibration in that building for sure. Commissioner Urban.
Yeah, Commissioner Whitley, just to reiterate, as a designated building, you can't go back in there and put in a modern day window, double pane glass or anything like that. You can only put you can refurbish what's there or actually construct a window to match what's in kind. And that's the unfortunate fact, but in order to preserve history, it has to look the way it was and constructed the way it was. And those are actual individual pieces of glass. They're mudded in, it's a caulk. Basically, you work in with your hand and your fingers, and you can't do it. If Stuart Gray was willing to discuss about new remanufactured windows with maybe a glass in there that had some value, but I think that cost would probably go through the roof. So It's a catch-22. We did the Massey Clark House and had some recreated, but we couldn't put energy efficient glass in, and that's unfortunately to the detriment of, heating and cooling that building.
So what I'm hearing is it's a historic.
That is correct.
Correct. Mayor Pro Tem McCool?
Again, I would be in favor of approving this budget. Again, I don't want to put new windows in there. If there's some windows that are original to the building or we're put in there, fairly historic, I'd like to see those preserved and stay in there. So that being said, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the budget transfer of $97,000 from the tourism fund balance to the Parks and Rec operating budget for the window repair project at the Matthews Community Center.
A motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Garner. Any further discussion?
Yes, before I vote, the 97,000 from the tourism fund, taking that impact anything else that we had scheduled for the tourism fund?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And let me add a comment here, because at the 5% contingency, that's kind of our standard 5%. And I wonder, I'm thinking out loud, Corey, because we hadn't talked about it. Should we increase the contingency, because dealing with historic buildings, in some ways, you're not going to know what you're going to get or what looks okay. And I wonder if it's prudent. Now, what I would say, Corey, if y'all want to just stick with this, that's fine. But Corey, what to say to you, let's make sure it's all good wood. And if it, we'll come back to them and say, guess what, we need another $30,000, and we can do it that way. The other option would be for the board to increase the contingency now with this notion, let's make sure it gets done right and we don't kind of cheap our way through it. But it's a discretion of the board.
What would be this? How much more of
A contingency in a historic kind of situation is north of 15 or 20%. Because of you could get into it, and next the sills are rotted, and then the jack studs are rotted, and the king studs are rotted, and next the whole window's removed. And so I think a contingency is only used when you absolutely have to have it. If it goes 5%, you get back your 15, you never use your 15, but you don't want to slow up construction either. The fact that he sees some problems, you go back to Hazen comes back before the board, the guy's already mobilized, he comes back and says, I'm done, I got to remobilize, it's going to cost even more. I would suggest we amend this to maybe at least a 15 or 20% contingency and go from there. And if something really is starting to fly in the face of something going on, just let me know.
I'm certainly fine with that.
So if we did a 15% contingency, it'd be about $12,300. So let's see if I can do some. What would that? I amend the motion to. Gotta do some math. Let's see. To do the cost to be $104,300. That's fine. $105,000 from the tourism fund balance to the Parks and Rec operating budget for the window repair project at the Matthews Community Center.
Can we get someone to check that math? That's good, right?
That's good.
Is it right?
Yeah.
No faith in me, Mayor.
Well, I guess I didn't realize the 97 already had a 5% contingency, because
Yeah,
I'm
that's
certainly
what it
not, 15% of 97,000 is not what you said, but 97 already had 5 in it.
Yep.
I have to ask a question before we call the vote to Corey. How often are our contingencies used? I'm concerned. Are we encouraging our vendors to find a reason to use our contingency?
I'd say no, they won't know about this contingency.
They should.
It's a public meeting, so.
Oh, yeah, I guess they would know.
And you can see how many people are here.
Yeah, and the say projected vendor, they've already given us a price.
Okay.
We still are waiting for one other cost to come in. Like I said, they've already given us their price. Again, we're confident in this vendor as a call. We hope he's an honest vendor. Stuart sent us his way. But no, I wouldn't say that they typically do that.
Okay, yeah, let's hope not. That's fine. So the original motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, correct? Seconded by Commissioner Garner. So all in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's a.
Look for a motion to empower the manager to enter into agreement with the selected vendor.
So moved.
Okay, so we have the same dynamic duo doing the motion and second, motion by Commissioner or Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Garner. All in favor? All opposed? That passes as well. Thank you. Move on to item 9C, consider recruitment and hiring bonus program for police, fire, and EMS and public works positions.
Budget report.
I'm sorry, I skipped that. I put a check to fire. Sorry, receive the monthly budget report from Teresa Falk.
I mean, if you would like to skip me, Mr. Mayor, that would be just.
I'm sorry, I
fine.
already put a check by your name for some reason, because I know it's going to be a perfect, awesome report. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. You do have before you the monthly budget report for the month of January 2022. And I'm happy to report that ad valorem tax collections are averaging, we're 1.5% higher in collection percentage than we were year over year for last year at the same time. And local option sales tax continue to be very impressive and impress us all. And we are currently 19% higher than year over year at the same time last year. Occupancy tax is also still faring very well and is trending 54.78% higher than last year at the same time. And rental car tax is 29.94% higher than same time last year. So it is a very good and happy report.
We have any questions? Commissioner Garner?
What do those numbers look like compared to 2019? Did you compare that far back or?
I have not. However, this year's current budget for local option sales tax was increased by approximately 12%, and we are actually 19% higher than the past year. So
I would add, I hope we don't get too bogged down in the weeds on this, but one of the sales tax is an interesting dynamic because what they do is they take all the money coming into Mecklenburg County and then they divide it by your tax rate and how much your value of property is, and that's your percentage. When you raise property taxes, and nobody else does, you get a slightly higher piece of the pie. It's very hard to project and estimate, but just know when somebody like Mecklenburg County or Charlotte, who are huge elephants, that has that same inverse impact on our sales tax. But we can't tell you how much that affected us, but we were the only one in the county to raise taxes last
right,
year.
and there's a 1-year lag on that. So actually, we will see the FY23 increase will be where we raised taxes and no one else did.
Even better.
Yes.
Commissioner Tufano?
Hi, Teresa. It may be in here somewhere. If it is, I apologize. I think I found it. I just scrolled down to the next page.
Yeah.
So this is I was going to ask what the current tourism fund balance was.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Another excellent report. You just keep bringing good news. That's fantastic. Move on now to 9C, consider recruitment and hiring bonus program for police, fire, and EMS and public works positions. Tanya McGovern.
Mayor and Board, thank you for the opportunity to speak again tonight. As we've talked some recently, like most organizations nationwide, we are experiencing issues filling our vacancies and finding qualified applicants that are wanting to come work for us or anywhere really. Currently, at the time that I wrote this memo, February 24th, our vacancy rate for full-time positions was sitting at 9.94%. That represents 18 full-time positions. We are currently aware of 5 pending retirements that are not included in that number. And I have another meeting in the morning with someone who wants to talk about retirement. We do know there are more pending later in the year. So we're in a really bad place. like a lot of other organizations. So staff has put together a pilot program to offer recruitment and referral incentives for qualified positions to qualified employees. A list of these eligible positions are facilities maintenance technician, which we are currently on round 5 of advertising. Firefighter, fleet maintenance mechanic. We currently have 2 positions open in fleet maintenance. Maintenance worker, so all of the frontline positions at Public Works, police officer, which we have a whole lot of vacancies, and also telecommunicator. We've picked these positions. There are frontline positions. They're the positions that come vacant most often in our organization. We do know that there are other organizations doing these types of programs. Some of those include Salisbury, Cornelius, Huntersville, and Harrisburg. So how the program would work is we would offer a hiring bonus for these qualified positions. They get $1,000 when they come in the door as a part of their first paycheck. And then based on the, Maureen, if you want to scroll down just a little bit, based on the chart with years of experience or military experience, they would qualify for an additional amount of money that would be paid out in 2 payments, once at the end of 6 months, which is in line with our evaluation period of new employees, and then the other half at the end of a year staying with us. So hopefully also a retention incentive for those new people coming in the door. In addition to the hiring bonus, we do want to look at recruitment incentive as well. So most of our employees, we do have some positions that will not qualify, like department heads, town manager, assistant town manager, or someone who would actually sit on the hiring board would not qualify for the recruitment incentives. But that amount that we're proposing is $1,000, $500 paid out when the referee, I guess, is hired, and then $500 after 6 months of that employee being with us. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Yes, I just want to make a comment. One thing that Tanya mentioned, which is really, opened my eyes, is if we have a vacancy rate of 9.94%, that means almost 1 out of 10 positions in the town are unfilled. If you couple that with people calling in sick, it makes you even more greatly appreciate what a great job our staff does, because they're understaffed. Those of us that came from the corporate world know that would be very difficult to run a business if you had, 10% of your positions not filled, and plus allowing for people calling in sick. So that's startling. So I would certainly be in support of this. Anything we can do to fill these positions more quickly, I would be in favor of. Commissioner Tufano.
2 questions. Does any of this bonus money, is it ARPA eligible?
It certainly could be ARPA eligible because we're following the supplanting method. So if the board wanted to follow that path, you certainly could. The plan right now is that we have so much in lapsed salaries that there's not an additional budget ask to move forward with this. We expect to be able to fund it with existing dollars in the budgets. So if you wanted to absorb it that way, that is another option.
Thank you. The second question is, I've had numerous conversations with Chief Kennenberg and Chief Bennington about retention issues. I'm all for an upfront bonus, but we need to keep them. There's really nothing to keep them after they've received the bonus and they move on, after 6 months or a year. I'd like to consider having a longevity bonus as well. So in other words, something to keep them in place for well past the training period, so that they become established and it gives them something to look forward to. Has that been considered?
We actually have a longevity bonus in our personnel policy currently.
Wonderful. How much is it?
It depends on years of service. It ranges from $100 to $1,000, depending on years of service. I can provide you a copy of that.
Yeah, that's nice, but it's really small, isn't it? Yeah.
If you want to increase it, I am all for that.
That's really not much of an incentive to stay 5 years. So, but no, and I mean, I'm glad it's there, but it really is inadequate. So I think that opens up a whole broad conversation here.
Yeah, that's certainly another discussion for us to consider, but for tonight, we're considering this. Commissioner Whitley.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of this. I look at of the position now and trying to keep people working for you. And I had to implement bonus for my employees at the daycare. And certainly it was more than this, but they are very appreciative, and I hadn't lost nobody in the last 2 years. But I'm like Mark now, the longevity bonus, I'm glad to know we did, because I think I asked that when I first came on. I didn't think we did a long, but I know when I was with the state, and after 20 years, longevity bonus was quite sufficient. And certainly rightly so after 20 years, and a lot of employees look forward to that longevity bonus. But certainly I'm in favor of this program because I know I had my granddaughter start a new job, and they gave her an incentive of $5,000 to join, half when she joined and half the other half when she stayed over a year. Certainly that was a great incentive. $5,000 is a good incentive to take a new job. That's how, but this is the time that we are living in now. And just city, as Hazen said, we're analog and we got to get digital, and that means we got to spend some money to be competitive. And that's, but I'm all in favor of this, even if we have to bump a little bit more. But that's,
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that was my next question. Is there funds available to increase this recruitment bonus, the hiring bonus?
I would say I'd defer to Becky, but I would say based on our current vacancy rate, I would imagine that there are funds to increase it if the board desires. Yes.
Yeah, I would definitely like to increase this.
We like this conversation.
Yeah, we love this conversation.
Okay, so now the question is, what do we increase it to? Is there any rule of thumb about percentage of annual income for hiring bonuses?
I don't know about the private sector. This is, in my experience, a newer concept to local government. So I would have to look into best practices kind of as a bigger picture. If you want me to do that, I'm happy.
That's
to do
what we
that.
could do, Commissioner, if it's the will of the board. First of all, we could table this for 2 weeks and we could bring back what Huntersville's doing or Mooresville or something. So y'all could see in actual practice, what is maybe what is the best in class.
Yeah, I can bring back what they're doing, and I can also look at kind of best practices for industry who've done this for
Definitely
more
worth the
years.
wait. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Let me say for the record, I am not in favor of increasing this. I think we should try with this and see if it has an effect before we bump it up. This is
Well,
the
we-
taxpayers' money that we're, doling out. And I think if this could be effective, there's no need to increase it. Let's see if this works first would be my recommendation.
One, we could bring it back to the board in 3 months or 6 months. You know what I mean? We could, because this proposal is 12 months, but we could bring it back to you quicker. So y'all could see, guess what, hasn't moved the needle or it has moved the needle.
Any other thoughts? Mayor Pro Tem McCool?
I would be in favor of tabling it for 2 weeks, going back, seeing what it is. I do think that I agree with Commissioner Tofano. I don't think this is enough. I think a little bit more would be more incentive for them to get out and do it. Again, it's, $1,000, but I think we could do more.
Okay.
Is that the consensus of the board? Commissioner Garner?
Well, in the meantime, when Tanya is interviewing people, what's the answer to that?
The answer is we have no signing bonus currently.
The answer would be, don't say yes for 2 weeks. That's what I
Right,
would
but I
tell
mean-
people.
Commissioner Urban?
Seriously.
Yeah, I think that's a disincentive.
Of course, they could take another job in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and they could go up to Huntersville that is offering up to $6,000 in hiring incentives.
So what were you saying, Hazen? That if someone's interviewing right now, tell them to hold off for 2 weeks?
Well, I mean, that's a very cynical thing to say, but if you're looking out for the best interest of this future employee, like sit tight, the board is interested in more than 3,000. Well, depending on what boxes you can check, the board is interested in more than what we've offered. I don't know how time.
I'm kind of in,
I mean, I
I'm kind
don't-
of in the
Chief
mayor's
would
camp. I'd
handle
be
that.
willing to pull the trigger tonight on what we have and seeing how it affects very rapidly. And if you all of a sudden, like, it's just bombing and then we reconsider, I'd rather have that conversation start sooner than later. So
I
that's-
guess this is a question for Charlie. I don't know if it can be made retroactive to March 1st so that anyone who interviews while you're evaluating can still be, because we do have fleet maintenance interviews scheduled. We're always trying to schedule police officer interviews.
I think
So-
that's within the law.
Okay.
And I think you could go ahead and adopt this and then look at it again in 2 weeks and raise it and then make that raise retroactive to March 1st.
So I don't know if that's a middle ground.
That gives you an option. Do nothing tonight, wait 2 weeks, or do a hybrid. Part tonight and part in 2 weeks.
Anybody like to make a motion?
Hearing none, I'd like to go ahead and pass it on to implement our time program as proposed based on the current letter as outlined by Tom McDonough, Byrne, our Human Resources Director, dated February 24th, 2020.
We have a second. A motion by Commissioner Urban, a second by Commissioner Garner. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? So that passes unanimously. And you're going to come back in 2 weeks and
Okay.
and advise if this is insufficient. All right, thank you. Can I add one thing? I would suggest that those, I believe it was Commissioner Tofano and Mayor Pro Tem McCool, if you're interested in re-looking at our longevity policy, if you perhaps put something together for staff to review.
Sure.
I don't want to just dismiss that idea. So I think we need to have, put something forward and Tanya can review it and bring it back to the board. All right, item 9D, receive information on installation of traffic calming devices on Morningwood Drive. Susan Abina-Woolley.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you remotely tonight. This item I'm presenting in conjunction with the Matthews Police Department. So you'll notice a theme, right, from Saturday to today. This is the third item where I've partnered with, or engineering and police have partnered together for safety improvements. Matthews Police Department had a concern about speeding on Morningwood Drive and installed their radar detectors. And it was determined that, yes, there is actually speeding on Morningwood Drive. To familiarize yourself with where it's at, go to the southeastern part right up against Union County line. Eastwood Forest straddles Union County line between Matthews and Stallings. And we've recently spent some time out there, code enforcement, working with the neighbors on the appearance of that neighborhood. Well, Morningwood Drive is a cut through for people wishing to avoid the intersections with Potter's Road in Stallings. And that's the main complaint from the neighbors is the cut through traffic. And since we have the demonstrated speed recordings, that's definitely a high concern. Well, these are all NCDOT maintained streets in this whole neighborhood because it straddles the county line. And we learned from NCDOT that yes, they do allow traffic calming devices on their state maintained streets. So tonight, I'm just coming to you to let you know that we heard this complaint from the neighbors. We received data stating, yes, there is a speeding problem. The managers, chief of police, public works met and talked about what might be a solution. And the red marks you see on this diagram are 4 proposed speed cushion locations. Now, the DOT does require some rigorous work to be submitted to them before they allow devices to be installed. And we are willing to undertake that work. Part of it is a traffic study, which I am qualified to sign and seal. Another part of it is a petition from the neighborhood. I've reached out to one of our neighborhood contacts already to try and update him on the information. And so I just want to let you all know, information item, that we're still working with the Eastwood Forest neighborhood. We just have a few more items to pull together for the state, and then we'll come back to you once we've met with the state to let you know of the results, if they're going to accept the traffic study or not. We would be responsible for installing and maintaining the speed humps. The state does not install and maintain. Happy to answer any questions at this time.
Commissioner Hoover.
Yes, I was wondering, has there been any interest in these recyclable rubber ones? Because they're removable if you have to have street maintenance. So there's all different sizes, and I just picked one out here, and for 8 of them, it's just like a little over $2,000 to do the whole road. And to put them down, you just hammer them in with the special little hardware that they have. And I didn't know if that had been looked into.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for doing some research. Public Works Director CJ O'Neill did research them. He researched ones that would be comparable to what we would want to see as far as like duty rating. And he determined that our speed cushions were actually more cost effective than those for these 4 locations. Remember too, part of the cost of these 4 locations is the associated signage that goes with them.
I do want to add, I think Susan's being a little bit modest because DOT said, no, we don't allow speed cushions on state maintained roads. That was their first answer, which is totally like, so the community gets hurt because DOT's got a rule, right? And so Susan took it upon herself to push it up the bureaucratic ladder until somebody, common sense prevailed, and Susan deserves a big thank you for that hard work.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Crowd
CJ
is
did.
going crazy, Susan. I know the crowd is just. I drive on this road fairly regularly, and I have seen sometimes people determine how fast their cars can go from one end to the other. And I've seen some small children playing that, where their parents jerked them out of the road while some people that weren't too smart, were speeding. So there's quite a lot of speeding on this road. I've seen it pretty often. So I think these are really well needed. I'm glad to say that we recently had this road paved as well. It was in horrific condition. So this would be another improvement. I would be totally in favor of this. I'm very concerned about those children that are playing with people. Just, you got that nice big long stretch there, and people just like to open their vehicles up and see how fast they go. So I think that would slow them down. All right. Any further comment? Commissioner Garner, do you have your hand up? I'm misreading you tonight. Yes. Are there any other comments or questions for Susan regarding this item?
I do not have a comment or question, but I recommend we approve the speed hump and traffic calming policy as presented by Susan Habina Woolard, dated February 15th, 2022.
Thank you, Commissioner Garner. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second by Commissioner Whitley. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Move on to the next item, consider speed hump and traffic calming policy with Susan again. That's what we just approved. No, we just did. Do I have two things on my? Oh, that was it. Okay, I got you. Okay.
So on this end, it sounded like we just discussed this item and approved it. Was I mishearing?
That's correct. That's what we just
I
did.
thought that was specific to Morning Wind Drive. I had another agenda item to consider a speed hump and traffic calming policy period. Is that something?
That's
different?
right.
I'm not sure what this was. I was reading the, I thought from the, so I'm not reading the right
There
one.
wasn't a motion on the bus. No, that was just FYI.
That was a good motion. I said.
Well, I think we needed to vote on it. We needed to vote on that one.
Yeah.
We'll come back to you with the Morningwood item once the DOT still has to approve it.
Okay.
And approve the study, and we still have to go through all the steps. It was an information item to let you know we have heard the community and we are working on it.
Okay, well, the board, the consensus of the board is that we approve you going forward with that effort. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Now let's go to the next item, which is generic speed hump and traffic calming policy. Okay, so you're saying we didn't. Do you want to speak to this a little, Susan?
I would. Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought we were voting on the previous one.
You know, having these similar items back to back is confusing, and I apologize for that. It's just the luck of the timing, I guess. You know, now that we've just talked about speed cushions on Morningwood, a while back, the TAC requested a complete revamp of the speed hump policy to be more inclusive of other traffic calming options. And so we got a traffic consultant to help us figure out what traffic calming options that there were that we might want to consider, and the TAC vetted those, and we created the traffic calming matrix, which you all have seen before. And then I worked with the consultant that gave us some recommendations for the policy. And so the next couple pages of this memo are the rewrite of that policy. So if you go to the next page, please. The first part, and here at the very top, just in case anyone forgets, the second paragraph has the link to the NCDOT guidance about traffic calming on NCDOT streets. So just in case I get hit by a bus or whatever, and someone says, oh, there was that thing, here it is, I included the link. Okay, but the first part of the new policy outlines the process. In this process, it reflects more of what we're currently doing, where someone comes to me and says, I have a concern about speeding, and I immediately go out and collect data. Because we want counts on all of our roads. We want to know, like, is there actual speeding, or we're talking about perception of speeding, because those are two different tactics that we work with. And in this new process, the TAC reviews the request twice before making the recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. They'll see just about every request, whereas right now, they pretty much see the speed cushions that are on straightaways where there's high speeds. And so this way they'll see all, because again, traffic calming is a more inclusive category. The next section of this policy hasn't really changed much. It's all about the criteria and requirements for traffic calming items. So some of the same metrics are still there. The average annual daily traffic greater than 500. We did change it to average speeds are 5 miles and above the posted speed to be to modernize our policy. That's what most communities are using. And then again, keeping the information about emergency services route, all speed cushion requests or traffic calming requests do go to the Development Review Committee, which has police and fire there. And then the supporting documentation section, still the same. The requester needs to have a map and petition. The third section, if you scroll down, I think maybe it's on the next page. Yep, cost responsibility is heavily revised from the prior policy. This now includes a neighborhood match. And TAC had a lot of conversation around this. And because of the number of requests that come in, they thought that the neighborhood being responsible for 20% of the cost was appropriate, but also recognized in some cases, maybe there might be an opportunity for some lesser of a match. And that would be at the discretion of the board. And then this last section is still, again, pretty much the same. It's about the removal of any traffic calming measures. On the next pages, I've included those traffic calming matrix that you've seen before, as well as the petition, the speed hump petition I had revised to neighborhood devices petition to be more inclusive of different types of requests that our office receives. If you scroll down to the second to last page, the petition is information only for you. I don't think we formally adopt the petition. Keep going. And we have in recent years accepted even online petitions with a map graphic as a petition for the more tech savvy groups. Very good. And right there is the petition. And there's those different types of requests we receive in our office, not just traffic calming devices, but also street lighting or perhaps sidewalks. Thank you, Maureen. Now that you've gone all the way to the bottom, would you please go all the way back up to the top for the memo? The TAC unanimously approved recommending to the board to adopt this policy. And so the recommended action tonight is to approve the policy, but I am happy to provide more information if needed and answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Are there any questions or comments? I think we've already voted on this, so. I encourage the board to go back to the matrix and look at some of these words that are thrown about in Susan's profession, like chicane and choker and all those things, because sometimes I use them and I've learned quite a few. I've added quite a bit to my vocabulary from learning all the transportation jargon, but these are good things to know because we sometimes talk about them. Anyway, thank you, Susan. We appreciate that. Okay, Commissioner Garner, sorry.
Susan, thank you. And thank TAC for taking the initiative to get this information together and working through the policy. It's going to be a great help to Matthews.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Commissioner Garner. Sure. So who would like to make a motion on item?
I'll make the motion. I make a motion that we approve the attached speed hump and traffic calming policy dated by Susan, February 15, 2022.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Whitley, a second from Commissioner Garner. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the discussion.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 9F, receive information on end of year crime statistics from Chief Bennington.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I know it's end of February now, but I would like to at least provide an overview of our annual crime statistics because I think it's important for us to consistently look at data as it comes in, because in a professional organization such as the Matthews Police Department, we want to use that data to help devise our strategies, help check our status or our progress on what you've entrusted us to do. And it also allows us to adjust our priorities and look at different ways of doing business. So that's all tied to our mission statement, which is in the first slide. So first thing, I guess, is to kind of understand how crime stats work. There is a new system. I guess it's come, well, not new. It's been around for many, many years, but it's a new way of tracking data within North Carolina. It's called the NIBRS system, which is the National Incident-Based Reporting System. That NIBRS system is an incident-based system where every incident that occurs, we track that incident, and we look at not only the occurrence of it, but also some of the factors that might go into it, like victimology, location, time. Those type of things are all tracked under the NIBRS system. I will tell you that the NIBRS system is pretty complex in the number of crimes that we look at. It is broken down into two groups. One is Group A and one is Group B. Not to get too deep into the weeds on this, but Group A is a category of 22, or it's 22 categories with 46 specific crimes. Group B is a little bit more than that. But I will tell you that the way we look at crime statistically in the town of Matthews and historically across the country when they use NIBRS is Group A offenses, because those Group A offenses are really your more serious offenses. They're your rape, robbery, burglaries, and all of the things that kind of go with that, including larceny, motor vehicle theft, all of those incidents. And they're pretty related to the next type of system we'll talk about here in a minute, which is incident-based or index reporting crimes. But when you look at the NIBR system and you look at the number of occurrences and the number of crimes we've had in the town of Matthews, for 2021, we had 1,954 of those incidents, which is the lowest we've seen in the town of Matthews since 2014. And if we go back and we start looking at the growth of the town of Matthews since 2014, in my opinion, this is quite impressive in where we're moving and kind of how we're doing business in the police department. I guess the biggest takeaway from this is we're down 8% in just Group A offenses just for the year of 2021. Another way we look at crime is what's called index offenses or Part 1 offenses. Those Part 1 offenses are crime categories, except they're broken down into basically 8 primary offenses, which include murder, rape, robbery, ag assault, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson. Within all of those categories, there are subcategories. So I won't dive into all of them, but you'll see a slide here in a minute that has them. But what's important to know is that under the index offenses, we separate those out into violent crime and we separate them out into property crime. Index offenses or Part 1 offenses is what you see in the FBI report on safest cities. So it's important for us to track index offenses in the town of Matthews to see how we're doing nationally and how we're doing regionally as the FBI would report. And if you look at the slide, or at least the graph that you see there to the left, we are at the lowest number of index offenses since 2015. So we are seeing some progression in the way that we're doing business in Matthews. I've been before you many, many different times, and we've talked about proactive versus reactive policing. And we believe that proactive policing is kind of taking hold, and we're starting to see some of the fruits of that labor. Index offenses for the town of Matthews were down 16% in 2021. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about anomalies of 2020 with COVID, right? Because everybody wants to know, how did COVID kind of impact this? Well, you can see that the crime stats between 2019 and 2020 weren't impacted all that much, right? There was still an amount of crime occurring out there within these index offenses, but we do believe that the region and the country has started to get back to a little more normal routine, if you will, during 2021. So we do think 2021 is a pretty good representation of what we're seeing. These are the index offenses I talked about. These are separated out into violent crime. You can see the total violent crime offenses on the top. We saw a 10% reduction in violent crime in the town of Matthews. Now, to be completely honest and transparent, our numbers do not compare to Charlotte, right? Charlotte's talking about hundreds and hundreds of violent crimes. So when our numbers go down from 59 to 53, it does show a 10% reduction. And it's important for us to look at that, but it's also important for us to know that there were at least 6 less violent crimes occurred to somebody in our town during the year of 2021, which we think is a huge win for the town and for the police department. If you see here or notice here, it's also a 10% reduction in at least the category of robbery, where they're broken down between armed and strong arm robbery. That 10% reduction is another really good way of seeing or gauging how we're doing in proactive enforcement, making sure we're in the right place at the right time to deter crime, and making sure not only when we talk about traffic engineering, but also the crime triangle type engineering, making sure we're identifying areas and things we can do to reinforce the presence of the police department, looking at lighting, looking at tree growth, looking at shrubbery overgrown at certain businesses, identifying businesses that aren't showing us the front of their store. They're covering up with maybe, posters or advertisements. And we talk to them about removing those so we can continue that proactive enforcement or at least proactive offense of trying to reduce those crimes. What I will say is during the year of 2021, we saw a 22% growth in ag assaults. And I'll tell you that watching these numbers on a bi-weekly basis, I get updated every 2 weeks on these. This is one area that I was seeing significant number increases, not just, I'm talking about percentage increases. At some point during the year, we were up about 60% increase in ag assaults. That might be where we can talk about where COVID had some impact. You put families around each other for long enough, sometimes other stressors in life start to lead to arguments. And unfortunately, sometimes those arguments lead to assaults that result in serious injury. And when I say 33 ag assaults, please remember, these are serious assaults. These are not simple bar fights. These aren't, a brother pushing a sister or an argument between two neighbors that might turn to a fist. This is where we're talking about somebody got serious injury. So we did see an increase here. And we've been working with the Office of Violence Prevention out of Mecklenburg County. on these exact numbers for this year. And they are not only collecting our numbers, but they've collected all the jurisdictions. And there is a process to try to figure out how we can educate and prevent these from occurring in 2022. Violent offenses, as again, are down 10%. So we also look at it regionally, right? It's important to know, how does Matthews stack up with our constituents, or not our constituents, I'm sorry, our neighbors. Well, we do like to look at North Carolina as a whole, and we want to look at Mecklenburg County. So when you look at North Carolina, the violent crime rate for the state of North Carolina is 4.516, which means 4.516 individuals are victims of violent crimes in the state of North Carolina per 1,000. So Mecklenburg County is 7.596. These are also, by the way, 2020 numbers. They have not released their 2021 numbers. So we are comparing our 2021 numbers to their 2020. So there is a caveat there, which is what the asterisks indicate in our violent crime rate. But if you notice, the town of Matthews is 1.552. This has gone down. As I said, it's 10% down this year. I think at the highest I saw it when I first got here was about 1.69 violent crime rate. And one of my goals in coming here and working with the town manager is to increase the safety of our town to become one of the safest towns in North Carolina. And this is the statistic that they will look at to determine the safe cities within the state of North Carolina.
Chief, when
Yes, sir, please.
Because I see those things every once in a while come across, and it does make you kind of like jealous, like, well, what is Carrie doing? It's so great, for instance. But when you get that, would you share that with us when we find out how we're doing compared to other towns or, comparable cities? It's fun to, for me at least, I don't know about anybody else, but it's fun to see how we rank against.
So to understand you, you're asking to just see how we rank against towns similar to our size in the state of North Carolina?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they'll see, you'll see the 25 safest towns in North Carolina, and then you see Matthews is like 37 or some number. Like, man, why can't we be in the top 25?
Yes, sir. Yep. All right. And in the index offense, we talked about violent crime. This is the breakdown in the property offenses. So as you can see, we've had 17% less property offenses in the town of Matthews during 2021. This is really where, when people ask me, what is the primary crime you see in Matthews? It's typically property offenses. It's typically big box store thefts. It's typically breaking in of cars, burglaries, those type of things. So what you notice is we had a 28% reduction in burglaries. We had only, about 32 less burglaries this year than we had last year. That's 32 less businesses or residents that somebody broke into and violated and made people feel unsafe. So we do like to look at that number, because that's a good gauge of how we're patrolling, making sure we're in the areas where we identify maybe an uptick in crime. Next is larceny or thefts. If you notice, we're 14% reduction in larceny and thefts. And this includes everything from theft from buildings to theft from motor vehicles, shoplifting, again, in our big box stores. We have a process here in Matthews where we work with our big box stores. We work with some of our businesses that we identify on a monthly basis who is seeing most shoplifting happening in their store. We send an officer in to do what we call a CEPTED review, which is crime prevention through environmental design. We talk to them about, hey, what's your highest lost item? And if it's a drill from Home Depot, what can we do to secure your drills so that they move on to something else? And then we constantly work through that process to try to help the business reduce their theft, because ultimately it reduces crime in the town of Matthews and gives our citizens the confidence that they're able to live in a town that is relatively safe. Next is motor vehicle theft. Stolen cars was a significant concern probably last year, because we did see an increase. We took on a campaign last year, if you remember, the 9 o'clock hour, we posted on our Facebook page and our Twitter accounts to check your cars, remove your items. This was a big push in the educational perspective to get people to help us fight crime. Police cannot fight crime without the assistance of our community. We recognize that. That's called community policing. So we've been doing our best to try to ensure that they're helping drive down the crime, because it impacts them. And it's also a reminder to help them do that. So just as a highlight, the property offenses are down 17% in the town of Matthews. Overall index offenses for the town of Matthews are down 16%. So that's taking everything in account, from our violent crime to our property crime, to show where we are looking and how we are doing as a police department, and how we are doing as a community. Because I've already said it, we can't do it alone. It's how is the community helping us to identify real issues in the community and then deal with them. One issue I will point back up to is our theft for motor vehicles. If you look, we had a 26% reduction. We went from 256 car break-ins in 2020 to 189 break-ins of a vehicle in 2021. I heard our speaker this evening. I'm already working on trying to figure out exactly what incident she's referring to. We're going to have to see if it was reported. Unfortunately, the community is turning to social media to do their police reports rather than to the police to help locate and identify problems and issues. So we have been constantly trying to educate the community to go ahead and post it, let your neighbors know, because that's the educational perspective, but you got to let us know so that we can put officers in areas where we can identify issues, right? It's the squeaky wheel, it's the cops on dots theory, whichever one you want to kind of look at. So some highlights of our property crime: burglary down 28, larceny 14, motor vehicle theft 32, and arson, very small number, down 60%. But those are some of our highlights. One other area we look at is traffic crashes. I've been before this board many times talking about traffic, talking about how it impacts our community, how it not only emotionally, but also financially to members of the Matthews community and those that travel through our town. So we do track that. It's seeing a start to decline in the number of traffic crashes, which is significantly important to us. This is one area I will tell you COVID had an absolute impact. We almost toss out 2020 traffic crash numbers due to the fact of, nobody was on the road between May and September, if you will. It was really a very low volume of traffic. So we kind of tossed that out, which is what you're seeing there with the white arrow. Between 2019 and 2021. We've seen a reduction in traffic crashes. The first quarter so far this year, we're also seeing another reduction in traffic crashes. So this, I believe, is also the community stepping up and realizing that there are high crash areas, and we're doing our part to educate them on where they are and how they can help prevent those crashes. And I think it's having an impact. Overall, just to kind of put this thing into perspective, our traffic enforcement is up, right? We talked about the 3 E's during the planning conference. We talked about it. Education is important, engineering is important, but so is enforcement, reinforcing the standards that we need people to put their phone down, pay attention, take their foot off the gas, pay attention to driving and not thinking about other items. So we've been out there reinforcing that, some of it through citations, some of it through arrest, and arrest happened during traffic stops. But our traffic crashes are down 16% and our citations are up 36%. I don't believe that is an anomaly. I think there is some level of correlation with reminding people when they come through Matthews to slow down and pay attention. So it's important for you to also understand how Matthews Police Department operates. And I was kind of motivated to step into this realm after our planning conference, and looking at a presentation that Mr. Tufano provided to us. And the whole time I'm sitting there going, this looks really familiar, and I don't know why. That management concept, again, not using it as a financial concept as I think it was presented at the planning board or the planning conference, we use it as a management concept. What we do and what I've been speaking to you guys about since I arrived here is stratified policing. It's the accountability model. It's how do we identify issues, whether it be a single incident all the way up to a problem location or a problem offender. How do we address that to effectively reduce the impact on our community from either that significant single incident all the way up to somebody who may be taking advantage of car break-ins, as this our guest said tonight, or robberies or burglaries, because 80% of the crime is committed typically by about 20% of the population. So they're repeat offenders, meaning it's not usually a one-off. Somebody doesn't break into a house and stop breaking into houses. They typically break into houses multiple times. So when you have 5 or 6 break-ins, you try to find that related combination, whether it be from the type of house they're breaking into or the items that they're stealing. So what we do in our stratified policing model, and I stole this slide a little bit from Mr. Tufano, and this may not be in your packet, but I am more than happy to provide this to you, so you can understand how these things work in the Matthews Police Department. We receive input from our crime analyst, who is a key individual in helping us identify repeat incidents and locations that we need to pay close attention to, not only by location, but by time, by day of the week, those type of things. Our stakeholders, hearing from our community where their issues are, what they want to see us focus on, and ultimately command officials who might be out there at community meetings also. It comes to the chief of police, believe it or not, that is me. And I formulate the goals and objectives. I come up with the direction the organization should be moving in our stratified policing model. There's other things that kind of help drive this also, is something that we might look at as a long-term problem. Something is identified as a series of break-ins, a series of robberies, a series of shootings, maybe a series of runaways from a certain juvenile that runs away 3 or 4 or 5 times. That's a long-term problem. We have to work to get to a long-term solution. Once that solution or that once that problem is identified, once that problem is identified, I then assign that over to our commanders and for them to start working out strategies, start working with the sergeants on how we're going to get the officers in the places they need to be. The sergeants then take those strategies, takes that information, takes what we call commander's intent, right? If the commander's intent is, let's say for Eastwood Forest, one of them was reduce the number of Part 1 offenses or index offenses happening in this neighborhood. It's greatly impacting our citizens. That's one of our commander's intent. Well, then they have strategies. How do we do it? Let's put cops on dots when are crimes occurring. Let's do walking beats. Let's put patrol cars in the street or in the roadway. Let's work with the community. Let's have a community meeting. Let's figure out best ways to do it. That's what our sergeants and commanders will work on. But it's the officers that really drive the actions. Once they receive the commander's intent, we use a program called Smart Force. Our officers, for the first time, well, I won't say the first time, in the last 4 years, we've moved to this process where they input data on what they do. If they get out for a walking beat, I'll give you an example. One of the inputs was we had a series of stolen items coming out of one of our big box stores. The officer, under strategy, we started walking beats through that store to identify, work with, have a presence. Well, while doing that, they got to meet the new loss prevention officer. By meeting that new loss prevention officer, collected the information, put it into Smart Force. Now, every single officer that works that beat knows who that individual is that's going to help them work on that problem. So it's all about communication. So once that happens, we then have what we call accountability meetings. Every Tuesday, the commanders and the captains meet to talk about the issues or the items identified that I brought forward. They work those problems on a cyclical issue. Every week they meet to talk about what they did. Did it work? How is it going? But then you got to understand that as they're meeting on those, they're providing new directions to the sergeants. And we have 12-hour shifts. So every 12 hours, the sergeants are talking about those problems with their officer. Beat 2 has this issue. Make sure you're getting out of your car. Follow Smart Force directions. These are the commander's intents. Do I have any questions or concerns? It's all about communication. And then ultimately, the goal is to get to that monthly crime meeting with me where they report out on that problem. They report out on what they've been doing for the 4-week issue. What have you been doing? What have we seen as our crime analysts or crime data? Are we impacting it? And if we're impacting it, then I make the final decision when to close that problem or I adjust that problem. If that problem is assigned to a sergeant, I say, you know what? We're seeing numbers still going up. Sergeant, I need you. This problem is now assigned to the lieutenant. Lieutenant, you're accountable for getting everybody to start working on this problem even more than what we were doing. So it's an accountability model. For me, it's not a financial model, but it's an accountability model to make sure our officers know exactly what they're doing. It's all about communication for us. So this is an example of those type of meetings, and I'm not going to go into all these, but every week we look at the number of burglaries. Where are the burglaries? What's the trend for the last 5 years? What's the trend compared to last year? And how do we make adjustments? If we start to see that trend going up, as you would have seen in April, we had 2 extra burglaries in the month of April that we didn't have last year, but it was right on line with a 5-year trend. We're going to adjust our strategies. We're going to figure out where that is, and we're going to assign that problem to a supervisor. These are examples of how we do that. These are our crime bulletins. Some of you have seen these, especially the one on the right. The one on the left is an internal bulletin directing our officers where they need to be, how they need to be there, what we expect from them, and then how they're going to log their information and data and how long they spend in that area in Smart Force. The one on the right is our continual communication with the outside. We want to make sure that if we've got residential burglaries, people in that community know that there's residential burglaries, that they are going to be our eyes and ears and help us work through those problems. With that, also, we want to look at our data. This is an example of traffic crash data. How do we look at what can we impact the most? Are we looking at PVAs, which are parking lots for us? PVA is a parking lot versus road accidents. If we're starting to see an increase in traffic accidents in parking lots, we go back and we do the 3 E's to try to identify how to fix that, similar to what we would do on the roadway. We also don't just allow this, lack of a better term, just a willy-nilly way of just going out and doing whatever you want, right? So we provide the data to our officers, and this is an example of our traffic enforcement deployment strategy. This is 74 right there, where we have a significant number of crashes. We start talking about what are the contributing circumstances. Improper lane change, failure to yield right of way was 57%, failure to reduce speed was 42%. So it also directs the officers what they should be enforcing. You know, radar is great, but if somebody's out there and they're doing improper lane changes and they're cutting people off, that might be something we focus on in a different way. So just examples of how we deploy our officers, how we use data, how we use information and feedback from the ground up to drive our processes, and how we enforce and actually police the town of Matthews. That's all I have for you. I will tell you that I'm extremely proud of the Matthews Police Department, the officers and the staff there, because we are seeing a progression in the stratified policing model, I think is a positive push forward, and it's the right direction for us. I also want to thank the board. It's because of you that we are able to do this process. We are able to implement the changes that we've been seeing, because it does take staff, right? It's a ground up driven process. And if we don't have individuals and officers and staff members doing the work to help push it up, to help us make decisions, it would never happen. So I appreciate what you guys have done and how you have supported the Matthews Police Department. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I know that you offered me the opportunity, and I took you up on it, to attend one of your crime analysis meetings. I think Commissioner Gardner was there as well. And I would like to ask you to continue to invite board members to those meetings on occasion, just to see what's going on. I was particularly impressed by how the crime analyst points out where we have issues, and that's where you increase the policing instead of just doing the same thing all the time. You're really being proactive. And I also want to say, Chief, that we're very lucky to have you as our chief. I think you're doing an incredible job. We really appreciate everything you're doing. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Are there Commissioner Stefano?
When did you start using SmartForce?
Ooh, you're going to test my memory. We started stratified policing on a rollout scale probably a little over a year and a half ago. SmartForce came in just before that, because it is a critical way for us to communicate. When these problems or problem locations, problem offenders, problem situations occur, SmartForce is our task manager. It's that task that everybody goes under that problem to input what it is they're doing and how long they're spending. So I can't quote it, but probably about 2 years.
And what impact has using that had on your department's efficiency?
I mean, I can't tell you how much it has improved. The old way of doing it, and actually just the way that it was early on, was just word of mouth. We had a couple burglaries last night. Make sure you put some officers in that neighborhood. That was, in my opinion, just to appease the neighbors or to appease that they're doing something. SmartForce directs them to have a lasting impact. It puts those cops on dots in the areas they need to be. So we couldn't do what we do without SmartForce.
And I just wanted to mention to the board that SmartForce, thank you very much. SmartForce is an adaptation of the agile methodology that I presented yesterday at the planning conference. And this type of methodology, it can be used in other departments, and hopefully with the same amount of increase in efficiency and productivity. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I guess I want to comment on that a little bit. Your focus was on a financial model.
No.
His focus, well, this is what I took away from it. What I heard from Chief is not about the financial side of that, but strictly the management side, as opposed to cost benefit analysis, cost accounting.
If you recall, there was actually two parts to the presentation.
I do recall it.
Yeah. So the first part was more of the cost,
The audit,
and the second part was the process
of the internal cost process.
No, the first part was the cost model. The second part was the management model, which is what SmartForce is.
That's not what I took away.
Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Whitley.
Chief, where are we on our standards process?
Kalia.
That's important.
Kalia?
Yeah.
So I think we're doing very well with Kalia. So I don't want to misspeak, but we are probably 99.5%. And I don't know where I get the 0.5 from. I just don't want to say 100% done with our policy review. and putting policies in place. The next step will be taking those policies and those standards and getting proofs to them. So now that the policies are in place and we understand what the standards are and our policies meet those standards, now we have to go back and prove that we're doing it, right? So we are in that that phase now of pulling those proofs and starting to upload them. I'm hoping we will do a mock assessment probably within the 6 to 9 month range. After the mock assessment, there will be a recommendation for us on any changes that maybe didn't meet muster or pass muster. And then we will hopefully be moving towards a full assessment within the next 12 to 18 months.
Good. I'm very proud of that. And hopefully when we can accomplish that, that'll put us heads, and that really would justify us really getting some more funds in as well also.
Who else is CALIA certified in Mecklenburg County, Chief?
One second, Chief, for those that may be watching this at home and for our studio audience, can you remind us what CALIA is?
CALIA stands for the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. So it is a national group or a national organization that really looks at best practices. What is it that we've seen challenged by courts? What is it we've seen challenged by communities, and really how do we help build legitimacy and trust under 21st century policing? But what standards do we need to have in place to be a professional organization? And those are national standards. And before we were not in compliance with some of those, but we are getting there with this the CALIA accreditation process.
Thank you, Chief. Hazen, did you have a follow-up?
Who else? Do you know who else in Mecklenburg County is?
I know City of Charlotte or CMPD is CALIA certified. I believe Huntersville is CALIA certified. There are other surrounding organizations right now going through it. I believe Stallings is in this about the same process we are. They got a new chief a couple of years ago, and that was one of his pushes. And I believe Pineville might be going through it.
It is a best practice to be CALIA certified.
Yes, sir.
Anything further, Commissioner Garner?
Also, I see Davidson is, several years ago, heroin use was all over the media, and I guess we don't hear as much. I don't hear as much about it on the news anymore. How is that in Matthews? What are you seeing? Can you touch a little bit more about drugs and what's going on?
I can, and honestly, with the boards, if it's your pleasure, I wouldn't mind doing this on a quarterly report out of crime. Maybe it wouldn't be so long, and we can just talk about quarterly crime.
Yep.
And I think you're right. Heroin, or at least opiate overdoses, was a big push several years ago. I don't think it's let up in the eyes of the families that are suffering from that affliction. So we do see a number of overdoses in the town of Matthews. They're not highly reported. I haven't reported them to the board probably as aggressively as I should or I can, and we can come back to that if you wish to see the numbers at some point. But we do have several deaths a year in the town. We have multiple overdoses in the town, but we do treat those also very seriously. So not to kind of give away all of our secrets, but we have a policy in place that when we go to an overdose, we treat it as if it's in a homicide or an attempted homicide type case, because the individual that sold them that drug that caused either the hot shot, which we would call it a hot shot, or an overdose to that individual is a criminal. And though we have a not Good Samaritan law. Anyways, we have the law in North Carolina that if you overdose and you call for 911, we cannot take action against you because of possession of that drug, because we want you to call for help. But the individual that sold that to you does not have that protection. So we do treat that as if it's a homicide or an attempted homicide type case. We collect evidence, we seize property on site, and then we work in our criminal investigations division with our DEA task force officer to try to identify a dealer. And then we also try to link those overdoses with those in Mecklenburg County. We were the first ones in Mecklenburg County to use a map called OD Maps, where we map every overdose in the town of Matthews. And those that are using it also, we can see where the overdoses are happening in Davidson, Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, let's say. And then you might see a spike in overdoses happening, which means there's a bad batch out there. And we take that seriously and we start moving towards stopping the flow of that drug.
Can I ask one follow-up?
Sure.
Are you using the Narcan spray, or are you using injections? I heard a report recently about the effectiveness of injections over the spray.
Yeah, with the assistance of the town manager, we moved to a Narcan program about 2.5, 3 years ago. It's an annual purchase for us because they do expire. But to answer your question, it is a spray. We use the nasal spray. All of our medic units have it. All of our fire trucks have it. Now all the police department units have it. We actually issue an extra one to our canine officer in case their dog gets infected or exposed, I should say. So we do use Narcan and we use the nasal spray.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
On that, excuse me, on that same token, what is kind of the preventative measures? I had a friend who I was friends with in high school recently passed away by overdose. And so what's the preventive measures, getting into schools and talking about this? I know there's a big problem with this, especially among high school students. I saw it when I was in school. So what can we do, or what can the officers do to prevent it? Because I know you have the DARE program in elementary school, but I think about, in high school, it's a big issue.
So first off, thank you for disclosing that. And I will also, I think there's all of us sitting here today know somebody or have been impacted by this overdose. Myself also, my best friend died of a heroin overdose. So from when I was a small child, I think that education is an important perspective. It's important for us to get out and talk. DARE is one of those avenues of doing that. There is also, I sit on the Narcan and the opiate overdose task force for Mecklenburg County, where we are working on these things. There is also a push for us to work with the violent prevention task force to kind of work as one to kind of go through the drug prevention aspect of it. But I think Officer Young, who is in Butler High School, does a great job at mentoring and identifying individuals and kind of helping through that process. We looked at a middle school and a high school DARE adaptive program. We just never have been able to get Mecklenburg County, I think, on board with allowing us the time to teach that, because it does take time. But it also takes staffing. We have talked to Mecklenburg County school system and also the chief of the CMS school police about increasing staffing in our middle and high schools, which would help us do that. So those are all talks that are underway. I can't promise you that it'll go anywhere, but when I presented after the Butler shooting in Raleigh, we talked about that exact issue about increasing SROs, not only in elementary schools, but also in high schools.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, if I may, getting into it there, I think could have saved my friend's life in high school. And so doing something like that would be super important. So anything we can do to assist, I'd love to.
Chief, can you give us an update? We talked briefly a while back about the memo of understanding, perhaps working with CMS to curb violence. Do you have an update on that?
That was an interesting chain of events that happened. So to give everybody an update, I was contacted, I believe, by the mayor about him being contacted by the school board president about this MOU of Mecklenburg County could enter into about, school violence and those type of things, mainly about guns in schools and preventing access of legally or illegally owned firearms to our juveniles. So when I got that call, the individual who actually brought that forward to the school board did a presentation to the American Legion. And then during that conversation, Mr. Tofano reached out and said, hey, there's this woman who does this presentation. It was the same lady who contacted CMS, who also contacted American Legion, who I had at a chiefs meeting probably, it was last month. So all 4 chiefs in the region, including Stallings, Mint Hill, myself, and Pineville, met with her about the program, met with her about the process, and about how we can incorporate it in our community events. But in there, she also talked about that MOU. The MOU is really just an opportunity for all law enforcement in the county to sign on to say we are committed to removing guns from the hands of our juveniles or our youth that may get them legally from their parents. Some parents leave them unsecured at their home thinking their kids would never touch it, and they do. So we're still pushing that forward. I know she is the lead on that. We are not technically a driving force behind it, but we are pushing internally and locally within our programs and processes to keep that thing going.
Thank you for that update. And I know our community has been tragically touched with the incident at Butler, and we certainly don't want that to ever happen again. Any further questions for Chief Bennington? Well, Chief, we appreciate the update, and I think coming quarterly is a good idea if you agree to that, and maybe we can put you on the schedule a little earlier, but thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Not above Corey.
That's right. Yeah. Nothing with Corey. Corey always gets to go first. Let's move on to 9G. Consider an offer to purchase town-owned land. Hazen.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. This is a piece of property. Lori or whoever's driving, Maureen, can you just pull up the property? We've had this property, I think, from the mid 80s, and on the plat, it does show helipad. And I thought it was a joke. I mean, I really didn't understand it. Maybe it was when there was no hospitals close to us. It's just been sitting there. This company that's interested in developing the rest of that plot has approached us about purchasing the property. And then the first thing I did was reach out to our folks to see what could we use it for, and whether a fire substation or something for police or parks and rec or even affordable housing. And one of the issues with this tract is some of it is in the right of way for the future widening of Sam Newell Road. So the consensus from our staff is it does not have value for a future use from the town of Matthews staff. So we went out and got a appraisal done, and the appraisal came back at $320,000, which, I mean, to me is a lot of money. I guess it just illustrates the value of what's happening in the land in the town. So I think the question is, well, I would recommend that the board consider this and move forward. And then kind of, I think Commissioner Hoover talked about, and think about what would you want to do with that money, right? I mean, is it something downtown? Is it sidewalks? What is it? But I think we're kind of lucky to get this, and it's low. I went out and walked the property. The back part of it's low. It's really not a great site. It's good for him, but I don't see how it'd be good as a individual out parcel. So it seems to me that this is a good opportunity for the town to take advantage of.
Commissioner Urban.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to be excused from these deliberations because that parcel is adjacent to a property that my firm is engaged in. And I'm not quite sure what the purpose of purchasing the land is, but we're involved in that. So I wouldn't want to say yea or nay on this thing.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Just because you own property would not be the reason to recuse.
No, I don't own it, but we're developing and designing for that particular client. And so I don't want to, yeah.
Thank you for disclosing that, Commissioner Urban. All right, any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
My question is, and this is kind of, why is this so much more valuable than the land right up here next to the Beantown building? That makes no sense to me at all.
I asked the very same question.
Well, to be blunt about it, I mean, you guys accepted an offer that was a 6-month-old appraisal. So, and now it's probably 8 months old.
Yeah.
So that property, who knows what the property up here on Matthews Station Street's valued at?
Just a while.
Hazen, is there any gold or oil on this site?
We could try to keep the mineral rights if you want to, Mayor.
Well, I think, yeah, in all seriousness, staff has kind of really beat this to death. We actually considered, could it be used as a helipad? Of course, we don't own a helicopter, but there is no really good use for it. It's $320,000. I think we saw during our planning conference how desperately we need funding for lots of things. So I would be in favor certainly of selling this property and letting it be part of the development that's being proposed there. And if anybody agrees with me, they could feed and so inclined to make a motion, that would be great.
Mayor, if I may jump in, what really action that you need to take tonight is just let the staff know that the board would be receptive to receiving a formal proposal. So he needs to go back and make a formal proposal, and before you can take an action to call for public hearing on it, you need to have a bid deposit for that to count as a formal proposal. But I want him to know that that bid deposit, I don't know that he knows this, is non-refundable unless an upset bid occurs and he doesn't upset that, then he would get his refunded on his bid deposit. But it's not like an earnest money that if the seller does something wrong, then the buyer gets his earnest money back. That's not the case when he's going to submit a proposal to buy it through the upset bid process. So I think that Jay and I need to work with him a little bit to understand the process, but I sound like Jay has already given him some of it and that he's interested because obviously he owns the property around it. So he's very much interested in acquiring this property. But we need a direction. Can we move forward with him to submit a proposal?
And does that require a motion?
Not really. I think what you need to do is say, yeah, we'd be receptive and we move on.
Nod your head if you're receptive. I'm saying.
That was if you're sleepy.
I think you have direction there, Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll move on to the mayor's report. I just have two items tonight. The first one, I want to call on Commissioner Whitley to let us know, if you know, Commissioner Whitley, when the MLK walk and celebration will be rescheduled. Have you considered that yet?
Yeah, we have talked, and I'm pretty well certain that we're gonna postpone it to next year.
Okay, so it will not be rescheduled this year?
I don't think it will.
Well, that's real unfortunate. That's always a great time for us to get together and talk about some important issues.
But I will say this, the second Sunday in June, we will present the two
scholarships
recipients.
Okay.
The $2,500. And at that service, we will have, and I would like for you to be there, and we will have, they will do their actual speeches that they were gonna do on the second Sunday in June. That's at 9:45.
June 11th.
Yeah, Mount Moriah, that's correct.
June 12th.
June 12th.
Those of you that haven't had the opportunity to attend that, it's really a nice community event and celebrates the academic success of a couple of our young folks. So
And also while I'm speaking tomorrow at Mount Moriah from 10 to 2, there will be another testing / vaccine site at the Fellowship Hall from 10 to 2 in the morning.
Great, thank you.
If anybody need to be vaccinated, be tested.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I'd like to mention in my mayor report tonight is just to inform the public that we had our planning conference this past weekend, Friday through Sunday, attended by everyone here on the dais, and really appreciate all the hard work and time and effort of staff and the elected officials to help get a lot of the important business of the town planned for the future. And we had some very spirited debates and discussed a lot of things. And I think we're going to be better for it for doing that. We also talked about the possibility of maybe even having a mini conference later on in the end of summer or early fall. But I just want to thank everyone and for your efforts, particularly the staff that were here with us for many, many hours throughout the weekend. So thank you. And thank you to Lori for doing a great job of planning that and making it a success. So thank you. That's all I have. We'll move on to the attorney's report.
No report, Mayor.
Town manager's report.
No, sir, Mr. Mayor, nothing to report.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Whitley. All in favor? All that wish to stay, do